Every screen in the building went dark at exactly 2:47 in the morning. Nathan Cole was awake. He was always awake at that hour, sitting in his office on the 42nd floor of a building most people in Chicago thought belonged to the government. No signs outside, no company name on the door. Just steel and glass and the quiet breathing of 10,000 servers beneath his feet. He watched the screens die one by one, left to right, like dominoes falling in slow motion. His coffee was still warm. His pulse was steady. He had not been surprised by anything in 6 years, and he was not about to start now. His phone rang. "We have a breach," said Gary Holden, his head of cybersecurity. Gary's voice had that particular thinness that meant he had already sweated through his shirt. "I can see that," Nathan said. "It is not a brute force attack. It is not a known exploit. Someone walked through our firewall like it was an open gate." Nathan leaned forward. The reflection in his dead screen showed a man with sharp features, dark eyes, and the kind of stillness that made people in boardrooms forget to breathe. He was 34 years old. He controlled more digital infrastructure than some governments. His company, Axon Technologies, ran the invisible systems that kept hospitals staffed, traffic moving, power grids balanced, and emergency calls routed to the right dispatcher. He did not build products. He built the floor everyone else stood on. And someone had just put a crack in it. "How deep are they?" he asked. "Deep. They are in the secondary architecture, not the public-facing systems. The internal routing layer." Nathan stood up. That was the layer nobody outside Axon even knew existed. The layer where decisions were made about which cities got priority bandwidth, which hospitals got faster emergency response codes, which neighborhoods the algorithm treated as high value. "Lock nothing down," Nathan said. Gary went quiet for 3 full seconds. "You want me to leave the doors open?" "I want to watch them move. If they are good enough to get in without tripping a single alarm, they are good enough to know when we are watching. So we do not watch. We listen." He hung up, sat back down, picked up his coffee. For the first time in longer than he could remember, something in his chest shifted. Not fear, not anger, something closer to hunger. It had been a very long time since anything was interesting. Nathan Cole had not always been this person. There was a version of him that existed before the glass tower and the silent office and the army of engineers who called him sir without being told to. That version was 9 years old, standing in the kitchen of a house in suburban Detroit, watching his mother cry into a dish towel while his father sat at the table with his head in his hands. His father, Peter Cole, had been a software engineer with a small company and a business partner he trusted like a brother. That trust was the kind people write about in graduation speeches. Wholehearted, unguarded, built on handshakes and shared meals, and the naive belief that people who eat at your table will not steal the legs out from under it. The partner did exactly that, moved money, forged documents, vanished to another state with everything the company was worth, and left Peter Cole holding debt like a bag of rocks tied to his ankles. Bankruptcy followed. Then the house, then the car, then the quiet, steady erosion of his father's posture, his voice, his willingness to look people in the eye. Nathan watched it happen the way a child watches a building come down, understanding the destruction but not the engineering behind it. He learned one thing from that kitchen, and he learned it so deep it became the operating system of his entire life. Trust is a design flaw. Systems do not betray you. People do. Build the system, remove the people, control the architecture, and the architecture controls everything else. By 16, he was coding tools that automated small business accounting. By 20, he had dropped out of college to build his first real product, a routing optimization system that could cut emergency response times by 30%. By 25, he had his first major contract with the city of Chicago. By 30, he had contracts with 47 cities across 3 continents. He did not do interviews. He did not go to parties. He did not date in any way that lasted longer than a dinner reservation. His personal life was a clean room, sterile and controlled, and he preferred it that way. The only photograph in his office was of his mother. She had died 2 years ago, and he had planned her funeral 3 months before it happened, down to the music, the flowers, and the exact temperature of the reception hall. Control was not his personality, it was his religion. So when someone cracked his system open like an egg and walked through his most protected architecture without making a sound, it was not the breach that unsettled him, it was the elegance of it. Whoever was inside his system was not a vandal. They were not stealing data or planting malware or demanding ransom. They were mapping, carefully, methodically, with the patience of someone drawing a blueprint of a cathedral. They were documenting how Axon's internal systems made decisions. Which data went where, which populations were prioritized, which ones were not. Nathan spent the next 14 days tracking the intruder's movements through his own system. He did not involve law enforcement. He did not alert his board. He sat alone in his office at night and followed the ghost from server to server, admiring the craftsmanship while cataloging the threat. On day 15, he did something that would have gotten him fired if he answered to anyone but himself. He left a message. Not an email, not a phone call, a line of text embedded in the metadata of a file the intruder had accessed, invisible to anyone who was not reading at that exact depth. It said, "You missed a partition on server cluster 9. Sloppy." He waited. 6 hours later, a reply appeared in the same channel, written in the same invisible language. "I did not miss it. I deprioritized it. Unlike your routing algorithm, I triage based on actual need." Nathan read the message 3 times. He closed his laptop. He opened it again. He read it a 4th time. Then he laughed. It was a strange sound in that office. The walls did not know what to do with it. Across the country, in a 1-bedroom apartment in Portland, Oregon, a 28-year-old woman named Lena Harper stared at her screen and realized she had just talked back to one of the most powerful men in the world. Her cat, a fat orange disaster named Clementine, was sitting on her keyboard. Lena did not move her. She was too busy trying to decide if what she had just done was the bravest or the most reckless thing in a life that had no shortage of either. Lena had not planned to become the kind of person who broke into corporate systems for a living. She had planned to become a professor. She had a degree in digital forensics from MIT, earned on a full scholarship funded by a grant for first-generation college students. She was supposed to be writing academic papers about cybersecurity frameworks and teaching undergrads how to think about data ethics. That plan died when she was 19. A man named Simon Kurtz, a freelance consultant she met at a campus hackathon, told her he needed help accessing internal documents from a pharmaceutical company. He said it was whistleblowing. He said people were being harmed and the documents would prove it. He said the word justice 3 times in one conversation, and Lena, who had grown up in a household where justice was something you talked about at the dinner table like weather, believed him. She got the documents. Simon sold them, not to journalists, to a competitor. 3 employees at the pharmaceutical company lost their pensions in the fallout. Their names were Daniel Greer, Patricia Holcomb, and Wayne Sato. Lena kept those 3 names in a notes app on her phone. She opened it every morning before she opened anything else. It was her private ritual, her daily reminder that good intentions are not a safety net, and that the distance between helping and hurting is exactly one bad judgment call. After that, she left academia. She joined a small nonprofit called OpenVeil, a scrappy, underfunded group of digital activists who believed that when a single company controlled too much public infrastructure, the public had a right to know how decisions were being made inside that company. Not the trade secrets, not the proprietary code, the decisions, the priorities, the invisible math that determined who got served first and who got served last. OpenVeil operated in the gray space between journalism and hacking, and Lena was their best architect. She did not crash through walls. She found the seams, the places where one system handed data to another and nobody audited the handshake. She was patient and precise, and she never took more than she needed. Axon Technologies landed on her radar because of a pattern. 3 cities, all running Axon infrastructure, had nearly identical irregularities in their municipal resource allocation data. ambulance response times that varied by neighborhood in ways that did not match population density or call volume, power grid maintenance schedules that consistently deprioritized the same zip codes, emergency dispatch routing that sent help faster to some areas and slower to others, and the line between fast and slow tracked almost perfectly with income level. It could have been coincidence, it could have been a dozen different things. But Lena had been doing this long enough to know what it looked like when a pattern was not a coincidence but a fingerprint. And this fingerprint belonged to Axon's core routing algorithm. She spent 11 weeks getting inside. 11 weeks of mapping, testing, retreating, remapping. She was careful. She was quiet. She thought, invisible. She was wrong. The message from Nathan Cole proved that. He had been watching her. Not just watching, studying. And instead of locking her out or calling the authorities, he had done something that no target had ever done before. He had started a conversation. Lena picked up Clementine, set her on the floor, and stared at the blinking cursor on her screen. She could walk away, shut down her access points, scrub her trail, move on to a different target. That was the smart play, the safe play. But Nathan Cole had called her sloppy, and Lena Harper had never once in her life let that slide. She typed back, and the most dangerous game either of them had ever played began. The messages came in bursts after that first exchange. Never on a schedule, never predictable, sometimes 3 in an hour, sometimes nothing for 2 days. They spoke in the language of the system itself, embedding words in data streams, hiding conversations inside the architecture of the very thing she was trying to expose. He tested her, sent her toward dead ends to see if she would waste time or recognize the trap. She recognized every single one, and each time she did, she left a small correction in his own code, a fix he had not asked for but could not argue with. She tested him back, left questions inside the data she accessed, questions about routing decisions and priority frameworks, questions that were really accusations wearing polite clothes. He answered some, dodged others, and the ones he dodged told her more than the ones he answered ever could. Neither of them said anything personal. Neither of them crossed the line between professional adversary and something else. But the line was getting thinner every day. wcw/home/claude-stores.txt. It lasted 23 days before one of them broke the unspoken rule. Lena was buried in a routing log from Kansas City, tracing a thread that showed how Axon's algorithm had redirected power grid maintenance away from 3 low-income neighborhoods during a heat wave the previous summer. The numbers were dry, clinical, rows and columns that meant nothing unless you understood what they described, which was this: air conditioning failed in 2 apartment complexes, and 17 people went to the hospital. 2 of them were children under the age of 5. She found the decision tree. The algorithm had not been told to ignore those neighborhoods. It had been told to optimize for cost efficiency, and cost efficiency, when applied without a human filter, looked at property values and tax revenue and maintenance cost projections and decided, with perfect mathematical logic, that some places were worth less maintenance than others. It was not malice. That was the thing that made her hands shake as she sat at her desk at 3 in the morning. It was not hate or cruelty or even negligence in the way most people understood the word. It was math, clean, elegant, devastating math that did exactly what it was designed to do and hurt people as a side effect. She embedded a message in the data stream. 17 hospitalizations, 2 children under 5. Your algorithm did this. His response came in 4 minutes, faster than any reply before. I did not know about Kansas City. She stared at the words. Clementine jumped on her lap, and Lena held the cat against her chest and breathed into orange fur that smelled like tuna and dust. You built the system, she wrote back. You did not need to know. That is the problem. Silence. 8 hours of it. Lena slept on her couch with her laptop open on the coffee table, the cursor blinking in the dark like a heartbeat. When the reply came, it was the longest message he had ever sent. It was not a defense. It was not an excuse. It was an admission written in the language of a man who did not know how to admit things in any other way except through data. He sent her access credentials to a partition she had never found, a sealed archive of internal reports from his own analytics team, flagged with concerns about algorithmic bias in resource allocation. Reports that had been filed, acknowledged, and filed again. Reports that someone had read, and someone had initialed, and someone had put in a drawer. "I read these," he wrote at the end. "2 years ago, I read them, and I told myself I would address it in the next development cycle." There have been 4 development cycles since then. Lena downloaded every file. She read them with the methodical focus of someone building a legal case, which was, in a way, exactly what she was doing, but something had shifted in the reading. The documents were damning, yes, but they were also marked with Nathan's own handwritten digital annotations, notes in the margins that showed a man arguing with himself, questioning his own system, pushing back against his own engineers, and then, every time, pulling back, choosing the schedule, choosing the cycle, choosing later. She understood that kind of cowardice. It was the quiet kind, the kind that does not look like cowardice at all because it wears a suit and speaks in timelines and quarterly reviews, the kind that says not yet instead of no and means the same thing. She understood it because she had practiced her own version of it for years. She knew the pharmaceutical documents were being used wrong, and she stayed silent for 11 days before the truth came out on its own. 11 days of later, 11 days of not yet, 3 pensions, 3 names she could not unlearn. Something shifted between them after Kansas City. The messages became longer, more frequent, still embedded in data streams, still hidden inside the machinery of Axon's own architecture. But the content changed. He asked her about Openvale. She told him about the founding, the mission, the 5 people who ran the entire operation out of a shared office in Portland that smelled like old carpet and strong coffee. He told her about the early years of Axon, when it was 4 people in a garage in Chicago, and the idea was simple, beautifully simple: make emergency response faster for everyone. Everyone, he wrote. That was the word I used in every pitch, every investor meeting, every contract negotiation. Everyone. Words rot, she wrote back. They start meaning one thing and end meaning another, and you do not notice because you are standing too close. He did not respond for 2 days. When he did, it was not a message, it was an invitation. Coordinates embedded in a file header, along with a date and a time. A diner in Milwaukee. Neutral ground. You chose Milwaukee, she wrote. Nobody pays attention to anything in Milwaukee, he wrote back. Lena stared at the coordinates. She had spent nearly 3 months inside this man's system, dismantling his architecture layer by layer, building a case that could bring his company to its knees. She had never heard his voice. She had never seen his face outside of press photos that made him look like a mannequin in an expensive suit. She knew more about his decision-making patterns than his own board of directors, and she did not know if he was left-handed or what he sounded like when he laughed. Going to Milwaukee was a risk. It was a big, obvious, flashing neon sign of a risk, and every protocol she had ever learned told her to stay home, stay hidden, stay in the wire where she was safe and he was data. She booked a bus ticket. The diner was called Frankie's, and it had the kind of decor that suggested it had been decorated once, in 1987, and everyone had agreed that was enough. Vinyl booths, fluorescent lights, a pie case by the register with 4 options, all of them looking like they had been there since the Clinton administration. Lena arrived 20 minutes early. She sat in a corner booth, ordered coffee, and watched the door. Nathan walked in at exactly the time he had specified, not a minute early, not a minute late, because of course he would be precise about this too. He was taller than she expected, leaner. He wore a coat that probably cost more than her rent, and his shoes made no sound on the linoleum floor. He looked around the diner with an expression she could not immediately read, and then his eyes found her, and something in his face did a thing she had no word for. Not recognition. He had never seen her face. Something else. Something like the look of a man who had been reading a book for months and was now meeting the author. He sat down across from her. The vinyl squeaked. "You are shorter than I imagined," he said. "You are more awkward than I imagined," she said. "That seems fair." They looked at each other across a table that had a wobble in one leg and a sugar dispenser with a sticky lid. Two people who had been circling each other through the digital dark for months, meeting in a place that smelled like bacon grease and pine sol, and neither of them had a script for this. "The routing algorithm," Lena said, because she needed solid ground, and data was the only ground she trusted. "You want to start there." "I always start there." "I know. I have been watching you start there for 93 days. The coffee arrived. The waitress, a woman in her 60s with a name tag that said Dolores, set the cups down without looking at either of them and walked away. Lena wrapped both hands around the mug. "The algorithm is biased. The algorithm is optimized." "Those are the same thing." "No," Nathan said. "Bias implies intent. Optimization implies parameters. The parameters are the problem, not the system." "Who set the parameters?" He paused, picked up his own cup, put it down without drinking. "I did." "Then the system has your bias. You just laundered it through math." The sentence hit him somewhere behind the ribs. She watched it land. She watched him absorb it and process it and decide not to deflect, which was, she understood, the most difficult thing he could have done in that moment. "Yes," he said, "that is a fair description." They talked for 4 hours. About algorithmic ethics and structural inequality and the difference between designing for efficiency and designing for equity. About whether technology was neutral or whether neutrality was itself a position. About Kansas City and the 17 hospitalizations and the 2 children, and whether knowing about a harm and failing to prevent it was meaningfully different from causing it. They argued, hard. Lena's voice rose twice, and both times she pulled it back down, not because she was wrong but because volume was not precision, and she needed precision right now. Nathan went quiet 3 times, and each silence was a different kind of thinking. The first was defense, the second was calculation, the third was something closer to grief. Somewhere around the 3rd hour, the conversation shifted, not because either of them steered it, because they ran out of armor. He told her about his father, not the whole story, enough, the partner, the bankruptcy, the kitchen, the dish towel his mother cried into, which was yellow with blue flowers, and why he still could not buy yellow dish towels without his chest tightening. She told him about Simon Kurtz, not the whole story, enough, the hackathon, the lie, the 3 names she carried like stones in her pocket. Daniel Greer, Patricia Holcomb, Wayne Sato, she said, and the names came out like something she had said 1,000 times, because she had. You memorized them. I owe them that. He looked at her with an expression she had never seen on a man who controlled a global technology empire. It was not sympathy, it was not pity, it was the look of someone who had just discovered that the person sitting across from them understood a specific kind of pain that he had believed was his alone. They did not talk about whatever was building between them. They did not name it. They talked about pie instead. "This pie is not good," Nathan said, looking at the slice of cherry he had ordered. "It is nostalgically good," Lena said. "That is not a thing." "It is absolutely a thing. This pie tastes like a memory of pie. Like the idea of what pie should be. The actual flavor is irrelevant. You are describing every marketing strategy I have ever used." She almost smiled, caught it, let it through anyway. When the check came, Nathan reached for it. His hand found nothing. The waitress had already processed the payment. He looked at Lena. She held up her phone. "You paid through their point-of-sale system," he said. It was not a question. "Their security is terrible. From your phone. While we were sitting here. It took about 40 seconds. Your systems are harder." He stared at her. She stared back. The diner hummed around them, Dolores refilling coffee pots, a man at the counter reading a newspaper, the pie case glowing its sad fluorescent glow. "Sloppy," Lena said. Something crossed his face. something he did not try to control, which was for him like watching a man remove his own armor in the middle of a battlefield. "When can we do this again?" he asked. She should have said never. She should have said this was a one-time intelligence-gathering operation, and that the next time he heard from her, it would be through a published report that would turn his world inside out. "Tuesday," she said. "Same place." She left first. He watched her walk across the parking lot to a bus stop, and he sat in that vinyl booth for another 15 minutes, staring at the place where her coffee cup had been, which still had a crescent of lipstick on the rim that was the color of dark cherries. He did not move the cup. Dolores came to clear the table, and he said, "Leave that one." She gave him a look that said she had seen every kind of fool that walked through that door, and he was a new variety, but a fool nonetheless. He did not disagree. The bus ride back to Portland took 14 hours. Lena sat by the window with her headphones in and her laptop closed and watched the country scroll past in the dark. Fields, truck stops, small towns with one streetlight that blinked yellow at an empty intersection. She thought about his hands. He had long fingers, and he moved them when he talked about systems, tracing invisible architectures in the air between them. When he talked about anything else, his hands went still, flat on the table, controlled, as if the only time he allowed himself to gesture was when the subject was safe, when the subject was math. She thought about the yellow dish towel. She thought about the way he said yes, that is a fair description, when she told him he had laundered his own bias through math. Any other man in his position would have argued, deflected, brought up the complexity of large-scale systems and the inevitability of trade-offs, and all the other elegant excuses that powerful people keep in their pockets like breath mints. He had just said yes. That yes was going to be a problem, because Lena had built her case on the assumption that the man behind Axon was either ignorant or indifferent, and Nathan Cole was neither. He was something worse. He was aware. He was conflicted. He was caught between the system he had built and the system he had meant to build, and the gap between those two things was wide enough to swallow 17 people in Kansas City and 2 children under 5, and God knew how many others, in how many cities she had not yet mapped. Aware and conflicted, and still choosing later. Still choosing not yet. Still choosing the quarterly cycle over the human cost. She opened her laptop. She opened her notes app. She read the 3 names. Daniel Greer, Patricia Holcomb, Wayne Sato. Then she opened a new document, and she began to write the report that would change everything. They met at Frankie's 4 more times over the next 6 weeks. Always on a Tuesday. Always in the same booth. Dolores stopped asking what they wanted and started bringing coffee and pie without being asked, the way a bartender pours a regular's drink before they sit down. The second meeting was still mostly about the algorithm. Lena brought printouts. Actual paper, because she did not trust any device in his presence, and she wanted him to hold the data in his hands, feel the weight of it, see the numbers arranged in rows that told a story about who mattered and who did not. Nathan read every page. He asked questions that proved he understood not just the technical architecture, but the human consequences, and that understanding made Lena angrier than his ignorance ever could have. "You see it," she said. "You see exactly what this does. I see it, and you have seen it for 2 years." He set the papers down, aligned them with the edge of the table. She had noticed he did that, aligned things, straightened them, made edges parallel. It was the small, constant maintenance of control, the physical expression of a man who needed the world to be orderly because the disorder underneath it was too much to sit with. "I have a board," he said. "I have shareholders. I have contracts with 47 cities that depend on the current system performing at current efficiency levels. If I rebuild the algorithm from the equity layer up, which is what your data suggests I need to do, I am looking at 18 months of reduced performance, a stock drop that will trigger investor panic, and the real possibility that cities will switch to a competitor whose systems are worse, but whose numbers look better." So the answer is money. The answer is that changing a system this large is not a decision. It is a campaign. It requires buy-in from people who do not think in the same terms you and I think in. People. People. Board members, investors, city officials who will lose their minds if response times dip by even 3% during the transition. 3%. 3% across 47 cities is thousands of individual response events. And 0% change means the current bias continues to affect hundreds of thousands of people every single day. He did not answer. He picked up his fork, put it down, picked it up again, and took a bite of pie that he chewed for a long time. "I am not disagreeing with you," he said. "You are not agreeing either. I am doing something harder than either. I am trying to figure out how." The third meeting was the one that broke the pattern. Lena arrived late, which she never did. She had been up all night cross-referencing Axon's routing data with public health records from Detroit, and what she found had knocked the air out of her. The same algorithmic bias that affected Kansas City was present in Detroit. Her Detroit, the city where Nathan's father lost everything. The city where Nathan grew up, in a house that was eventually sold at auction. The algorithm was deprioritizing neighborhoods that included the zip code where Nathan Cole had lived as a 9-year-old boy. The system he built to escape his past was now punishing the people who still lived in it. She sat down across from him and put a single sheet of paper on the table. It had one zip code on it, his old zip code. He looked at it. The color left his face in stages, like a tide going out. "Where did you get this?" "Public records. Cross-referenced with your routing data. This is my old neighborhood. I know. This is where I grew up. I know, Nathan." It was the first time she used his name, not his last name. Not Cole or your system or the man who built Axon. His name. And she said it the way you say the name of someone who is standing on the edge of something and needs to be reminded that the ground is still there. He stood up, walked to the bathroom, was gone for 7 minutes. When he came back, his eyes were dry and his jaw was set, and he sat down like a man, sitting down to a negotiation he had already decided to lose. "Show me everything," he said. She did. Over the next 3 weeks, she opened her entire case file to him, not through the system this time, in person. At Frankie's on paper, with coffee that Dolores kept refilling and pie that neither of them ate. She showed him the Kansas City data, the Detroit data, the data from 6 other cities that all told the same story. She showed him the internal reports from his own analytics team, the ones he had read and initialed and filed away. She showed him the math, his beautiful, efficient, cost-optimizing math, and she showed him what it looked like from the ground floor, from the apartments that lost air conditioning, from the neighborhoods where the ambulance took 4 extra minutes, from the schools that sat in the dark during a power grid maintenance decision. He took it in, all of it. He did not argue. He did not deflect. He sat in that vinyl booth and let the full weight of his own creation settle on his shoulders, and Lena watched something happen to him that she had seen only once before, in her own mirror, on the night she learned what Simon Kurtz had really done with those documents. It was the look of a person realizing that the story they told themselves about who they were had a hole in the middle, the size of a city. The fourth meeting was different. Something had changed in the air between them, a charge that had nothing to do with data or algorithms or the fate of public infrastructure. It was in the way his hand brushed hers when he reached for the sugar dispenser. It was in the way she noticed his collar was crooked and did not fix it but wanted to. It was in the half-second pause between the end of one sentence and the beginning of another, a pause that was not thinking but wanting. Neither of them acknowledged it. They were both, in their own ways, people who had been burned by trusting the wrong thing, and whatever was growing between them felt exactly like trust, which meant it also felt like standing on a ledge. They talked about other things instead. He told her about the first program he ever wrote, a simple calculator app for his mother's phone, because she could never figure out tipping at restaurants and was embarrassed about it. Lena told him about her grandmother in Michigan, a woman named Rose who had worked in a factory for 31 years, and who believed that every problem in the world could be solved with strong tea and stubbornness. "She sounds like someone I would have liked," Nathan said. She would have hated you, Lena said. She hated anyone who wore expensive shoes. He looked down at his shoes. They cost $1,100. He looked back at Lena. I could buy different shoes. You would still be a man who owns $1,100 shoes. The shoes are not the problem. What is the problem? She looked at him across the table, and the answer that rose in her throat was not about shoes or money or class or any of the things they were using as scaffolding to avoid the real conversation. The problem was that she was going to publish a report that would hurt him. Deeply, publicly, irreversibly, and the problem was that she was going to do it anyway, because the 17 people in Kansas City, and the 2 children, and the 3 names in her phone, and the old zip code in Detroit, all weighed more than whatever was happening in this booth on Tuesday nights in Milwaukee. And the problem was that he knew it. She could see that he knew it, and he was still sitting here, across from her, eating bad pie, and making her laugh, and looking at her with eyes that had stopped calculating, and started simply seeing. That was the most dangerous thing of all. The 5th time they were supposed to meet, Nathan did not come to Frankie's. He sent a message through their channel, 3 words, "Come to Chicago." Lena almost did not go. She called her colleague at Openvale, a man named Patrick Quinn, and told him she was considering visiting the source. "The source," Patrick repeated. "You mean the billionaire whose company you are about to expose?" "Yes. The billionaire you have been meeting for pie in Wisconsin. The pie is not the point. Lena. The pie has never been the point. That is what I am worried about." She went anyway. Nathan's apartment occupied the top 2 floors of a building on Lakeshore Drive. The elevator took 42 floors to get there, and when the doors opened, the first thing Lena saw was glass. Glass walls, glass tables, floor-to-ceiling windows that turned the apartment into a fishbowl for a man who never wanted to be watched. It was immaculate, every surface clean, every object placed with intention, every angle precise. It looked like a magazine photograph. It also looked, to Lena, like the loneliest place she had ever been. There was one photograph on a shelf in the hallway, a woman in her 50s with Nathan's eyes and a smile that looked like it had been earned through difficulty. "Your mother," Lena said. "Yes. She looks kind." She was. Lena stood in front of the photograph and felt the full absurdity of her position. She was standing in the home of a man she was about to professionally destroy, looking at a picture of his dead mother and wanting to reach for his hand. She did not reach for his hand. She reached for her bag and pulled out a folder. "The report is finished," she said. The room went very still. Outside the glass walls, Chicago sparkled and moved and breathed, a city full of people whose lives were shaped by the systems running beneath their feet, systems that Nathan built and Lena mapped, and neither of them could fully control. "How many pages?" Nathan asked. 53. "When are you publishing?" 10 days. He walked to the window, stood with his back to her. The city reflected in the glass layered over his silhouette, making him look like he was both inside the room and outside it, both here and somewhere else. "Can I read it first?" She handed him the folder. He read standing up. Every page. 53 pages of data, analysis, case studies, and conclusions that added up to one clear finding. Axon's routing algorithms systematically deprioritized low-income communities in resource allocation, resulting in measurable harm to public health, safety, and welfare. His name appeared 14 times in the report, not as the villain, as the architect, the man who set the parameters, read the internal warnings, and chose the quarterly cycle. He finished reading and set the folder on the counter, aligned it with the edge. That gesture again, that small, desperate straightening of things that could not be straightened. "This is accurate," he said. "I know. You know that publishing this will trigger a congressional investigation." "Yes." "You know it will cost me my majority board control." "Probably." "You know that the access I gave you, the credentials, the internal partition, all of it is traceable. They will know I let you in." Lena had thought about this. She had thought about it every night for 3 weeks, lying on her couch with Clementine on her chest, staring at the ceiling and running the calculus over and over. If she published the report, the trail would lead back to Nathan. His board would see betrayal. His investors would see negligence. The public would see another tech billionaire who chose profits over people and got exposed by his own arrogance. "I know," she said. "I am sorry about that." "Are you?" "Yes. I am sorry about the personal cost. I am not sorry about the report." Those are the same thing. They are not. They are two different things that happen to share the same consequence, and the fact that they share a consequence does not make them the same. He turned from the window, looked at her. The city behind him was all light, and he was all shadow. 10 days, he said. 10 days. That is not a lot of time. It is not meant to be. He walked past her to the kitchen, opened a cabinet, took out 2 glasses and a bottle of whiskey that probably cost more than her bus ticket. He poured 2 measures, slid one across the counter toward her. She did not drink whiskey. She picked up the glass anyway. "To accurate reporting," he said. "To accurate reporting," she said. They drank. The whiskey burned. Lena set her glass down and picked up her bag. "I need to go." "I know." She walked to the elevator, pressed the button. The doors opened. She stepped inside and turned around, and for 1 second they looked at each other across 20 feet of polished floor, 2 people standing on opposite sides of a decision that was already made. The doors closed. The elevator dropped 42 floors. Lena counted every one. Outside, Chicago was cold and loud and alive, and she walked 6 blocks to the train station without looking back, because looking back was something people did when they were not sure, and Lena was sure. She was sure the report was right. She was sure the data was clean. She was sure the consequences were justified. She was not sure about anything else. On the train back to Portland, she opened her laptop and looked at the report one more time. 53 pages. Clean. Airtight. Every claim sourced. Every statistic verified. Every conclusion built on a foundation that could withstand the legal and public scrutiny that would follow publication. Patrick called her from the Open Vale office. "How did it go?" He read the report. And he said it was accurate. Patrick was quiet for a moment. "That is either very good for us or very bad for you." "Both," Lena said. "It is both." She closed the laptop and looked out the window. The Midwest was dark and flat, and the train moved through it like a needle through black fabric, stitching one small town to the next. She thought about the photograph of his mother, the kind eyes, the difficult smile. She thought about the way Nathan aligned the folder with the edge of the counter, that small compulsive gesture that said more about his internal state than anything he could have spoken out loud. It was the gesture of a man trying to impose order on a world that had just told him, in 53 pages, that the order he built was broken. She thought about the whiskey. She thought about the fact that he poured 2 glasses, not 1, that he did not drink alone even though she was about to cost him everything. She thought about the fact that he said, "to accurate reporting," instead of anything else. Not to you, or to us, or to what we had. He toasted her work, the work that would hurt him. He raised a glass to the thing she built to tear down the thing he built, and there was a kind of grace in that gesture that she did not know how to hold. Her phone buzzed. A text from a number she did not recognize. She opened it. "You left your pen at the counter." She had not left a pen. She checked her bag. All her pens were there. Every single one. She stared at the message. He was giving himself a reason to see her again. A small, transparent, almost embarrassingly human excuse. A pen she never left. A door he was trying to keep open in a building she was about to demolish. She typed 6 different responses. Deleted all of them. Then she typed, "Keep it." 2 words. A closed door. A mercy and a cruelty at the same time. Because keeping the pen meant keeping something of hers, and she was not sure if she meant that as a gift or a goodbye. She put her phone down. The train moved through the dark. Clementine was waiting in Portland, and the report was waiting in her laptop, and the next 10 days were going to be the longest of her life. She closed her eyes. She did not sleep. Nathan stood in his apartment for a long time after she left. The whiskey bottle was still on the counter. Her glass still had a trace of lipstick on the rim. He did not move it. He did not clean the counter. He stood in the middle of his immaculate, controlled, perfectly ordered apartment and let the mess sit there. It was the first time in years he had let a mess sit anywhere. He picked up the report again. Read the last page. The conclusion stated, in language that was clear and measured and would read well in a newspaper headline, that Axon Technologies had failed in its public trust obligations, and that structural reform was not optional but necessary. Necessary. She used that word the way his engineers used the word critical, to mean something that could not be postponed without consequences. He set the report down, did not align it this time, left it crooked on the counter, next to the whiskey and the lipstick-stained glass and the pen she had not actually left behind. 9 days. He picked up his phone and called his chief legal officer, a woman named Claire Bradshaw, who answered on the second ring despite it being past midnight, because Claire always answered on the second ring. "I need you in my office tomorrow at 7, Nathan said. "What happened?" "Everything is about to change. I want us ready." He hung up, walked to the window. Chicago stared back at him, indifferent and electric, a city that did not care about the man who controlled its infrastructure, or the woman who had mapped its failures, or the space between them that was closing and breaking at the same time. The report went live on a Wednesday morning at 6 a.m. Eastern Time. Lena published it through OpenVale's website, distributed it to 14 journalists she trusted, and sent copies to 3 congressional offices that had previously expressed interest in technology oversight. Then she closed her laptop, fed Clementine, and sat on her couch in the dark. For 2 hours, nothing happened. The internet was quiet. The world was waking up, making coffee, checking the weather, living in the last moments before a 53-page document would rearrange the conversation about technology and public trust. At 8:14 a.m., a reporter at the Chicago Tribune published the first story. By 8:30, 3 more outlets had picked it up. By 9, the phrase algorithmic discrimination was trending. By noon, a cable news anchor used the word discrimination on live television, and the phones at Axon Technologies stopped ringing because every line was already full. Lena watched it happen the way a person watches a storm they predicted. There was no satisfaction in it. There was only the hard, cold knowledge that she had done what needed doing, and that the consequences would be distributed unevenly, as consequences always are. Nathan's face appeared on screen after screen. Press photographs, conference footage, the same 3 images recycled across every outlet. In all of them he looked controlled, composed, a man built to withstand scrutiny because he had designed himself that way. But Lena knew what the cameras did not. She knew about the yellow dish towel. She knew about the crooked report on the counter. She knew about the whiskey glass and the pen and the way his hands went still when the subject was not safe. Her phone rang. "Patrick." "It is everywhere," he said. "Every major outlet. Congressional aides are calling us. We have 17 interview requests. Handle them." "Lena, are you okay?" "I did my job." "That is not what I asked." She hung up, looked at her phone. No messages from Nathan. She did not expect any. She did not want any. She told herself she did not want any, and the telling was almost convincing. Axon's stock dropped 9% by the close of trading on Wednesday. By Friday, it was down 14%. 3 board members issued a joint statement calling for an independent investigation. 2 more resigned privately. The company's public relations team released 4 statements in 4 days, each one more carefully worded than the last, each one saying less than the previous one. On Monday, Nathan Cole walked into a conference room on the top floor of Axon headquarters and faced his remaining board members. 12 people sat around a table made of reclaimed oak that had cost $40,000, and every one of them looked at him with the expression of people who had trusted a captain and were now watching water pour through the hull. Claire Bradshaw sat beside him. She had spent the week preparing legal strategies, 6 of them, each one laid out in a folder with color-coded tabs and cost projections and risk assessments. The first strategy was aggressive: discredit the source, challenge the methodology, question the motives of OpenVale and its operatives. The sixth was the opposite: full cooperation, public accountability, structural reform. The other four were shades between. Nathan looked at the folders, looked at the board, looked at the window, where Chicago was gray and raining. "We are not going to fight this," he said. The room went still. "Nathan," said one of the board members, a man named Howard Griffin, who had been an early investor and who had the particular confidence of someone who believed his money entitled him to opinions. "You cannot be serious. The report is accurate. I have verified it independently. Our routing algorithms contain bias that results in measurable harm to low-income communities. This is not a public relations problem. It is a design problem." "It is a $50 billion problem," Howard said. "It is both." Claire opened the sixth folder. The reform strategy. Nathan talked for 40 minutes. He laid out a plan that would take 18 months, cost approximately $2 billion, and require the creation of an independent ethics board with operational authority over algorithmic decision-making. Not advisory. Operational. A board that could override the algorithm, demand changes, and hold the company accountable in ways that the current governance structure could not. Howard Griffin called it corporate self-destruction. 2 other board members agreed. The vote was 7-5 in favor of the reform plan, which meant Nathan kept his job but lost his majority control. The board installed a new oversight committee. Nathan's authority was reduced. His title remained the same, but the power behind it shifted. He accepted it. Not because he was noble, because he had spent 9 days reading Lena's report over and over, and every time he read it, he heard his own voice saying "everyone," in pitch meetings and investor calls and contract negotiations. Everyone. The word he built his company on, the word his algorithm had quietly, efficiently, mathematically betrayed. The congressional hearings came 3 weeks later. Nathan sat at a long table under lights that made everything look slightly unreal. Senators asked questions that ranged from incisive to performative. Some of them understood the technology, most did not. All of them understood the politics, which was that a billionaire tech company had been caught treating some citizens as less valuable than others, and that someone needed to be seen holding that billionaire accountable. Nathan answered every question. He did not deflect. He did not lawyer his way through the answers. He did not say, "I do not recall," or "that is a complex issue," or any of the other phrases that powerful people use to turn testimony into vapor. He said, "The system performed as designed. The design was flawed. The flaw is my responsibility." It was. A Washington Post columnist wrote the next day, "Either the most honest testimony in congressional history or the most sophisticated damage control ever attempted." Lena watched the hearings from her apartment in Portland. Clementine sat on her lap. The television showed Nathan in that flat, fluorescent light, answering questions from people who would forget his name in 6 months, and she watched his hands. They were flat on the table, still, controlled, except once. When a senator from Michigan asked about the Detroit data, specifically the data about the neighborhoods that included his childhood zip code, Nathan's right hand lifted from the table and touched the knot of his tie. A small gesture. 1 second, then the hand returned to the table. Lena saw it. She was probably the only person in the country who understood what it meant. That small reach for the throat was not a nervous habit. It was a man checking to make sure he was still holding together. She turned off the television, picked up Clementine, held the cat against her chest, and breathed into orange fur. "I did the right thing," she said to the cat. Clementine purred, which was not an answer, but was also not a disagreement. The weeks after the hearings were long and strange. The media cycle moved on, as media cycles do, to the next outrage, and the next scandal, and the next billionaire behaving badly. Axon's stock stabilized. The reform plan began its slow, expensive, unglamorous work. Engineers were hired. Auditors were retained. The new ethics board held its first meeting in a conference room that smelled like fresh paint and featured a table that cost considerably less than $40,000. Nathan worked 18-hour days, not because he was forced to, but because the work of dismantling and rebuilding a system he had spent a decade creating required a kind of attention that left no room for anything else. He ate at his desk. He slept in his office. He spoke to Claire Bradshaw 6 times a day and to Howard Griffin never, because Howard had resigned from the board in protest and was now giving interviews to business magazines about the dangers of what he called moral panic in the tech sector. Nathan did not read the interviews. He read routing data instead, line by line, looking at the system he had built with the eyes of someone who was finally willing to see what it was instead of what he intended it to be. And in the margins of every document, in the quiet moments between meetings and calls and decisions, he thought about a woman in Portland who had walked into his system and torn it open and shown him the truth about his own creation. A woman who had cost him his board control, his reputation, and the story he told himself about who he was. He thought about her every day. He did not call. She thought about him every day. She did not call either. The distance between Portland and Chicago was 2,100 miles. The distance between two people who had hurt each other for the right reasons was considerably larger. 3 months passed. Spring arrived in Portland with rain that never seemed to stop, and cherry blossoms that bloomed anyway, stubbornly, as if the weather was irrelevant to the business of being alive. Lena took on 3 new projects for OpenVale, a transportation app that was selling rider location data to third-party advertisers, a smart home company that was collecting audio recordings without adequate user consent, a municipal water utility that was using predictive analytics to prioritize infrastructure repairs in ways that favored commercial districts over residential ones. Each project was important. Each one was clean and straightforward in the way that Axon had not been. Villain and victim, cause and effect, right and wrong. She did the work. She published the findings. She moved on. But she moved on the way someone moves on from a city they loved, still checking the weather there, still knowing the street names, still dreaming about the view from a window they no longer look through. Patrick noticed. He did not say anything for weeks, which was its own form of kindness, and then he said it all at once over lunch at a Thai restaurant near their office. "You are not sleeping. I sleep fine. You have dark circles the size of quarters. You are eating pad Thai like it personally offended you. You check your phone every 4 minutes, which I know because I counted." Lena put down her fork. "Are you done?" "I have more." "Of course you do." The Axon story made us. It put OpenVale on the map. We have funding inquiries from 3 foundations. We have interns applying. We have actual legitimacy for the first time in 5 years. This is everything we worked for. I know. And you are miserable. She picked her fork back up, stabbed a piece of tofu, put it in her mouth, chewed, swallowed. "I did the right thing," she said. "Nobody is arguing that." "Then what are you arguing?" "That doing the right thing and being okay are not the same equation. You can solve one and still be stuck on the other." She looked at him across the table, this man she had worked beside for 4 years, who had terrible taste in music and excellent instincts about people, and who was, in his own quiet way, the closest thing she had to a best friend. "I think about him," she said. It was the first time she had said it out loud. Patrick nodded, not surprised, just patient. "I think about the way he read the report, standing up, every page. He did not sit down. He stood there, like he owed it that much, to receive it on his feet." Lena. "And I think about the fact that he could have destroyed me, his legal team, his resources, his connections. He could have discredited the report, discredited OpenVale, made my life a legal nightmare that would have taken years, and everything we have to fight. He had every tool to do it. And he did not. He did not. He confirmed the findings. He went to Congress. He told the truth." Patrick finished his iced tea, set the glass down, looked at her with the particular expression of a man about to say something he had been holding back for months. "You need to call him." "No. Lena. I published a report that cost him half his company. I do not get to call him. That is not how this works. How does it work? It works like consequences. I made a choice. He made a choice. The choices were correct. The cost is the cost. Patrick signaled for the check. You are the most principled person I have ever met, he said. And you are using your principles as an excuse to be afraid. She did not respond, because he was right, and they both knew it. That night, she opened her laptop and looked at the Axon routing data one more time. Not the old data, the new data. The reformed algorithms, the restructured priority frameworks, the equity-adjusted parameters that Nathan's team had been implementing over the past 3 months. The numbers were different. Not perfect, not finished, but different. Response time gaps between neighborhoods had narrowed by 18%. Resource allocation patterns were shifting. The invisible math that decided who got served first was being rewritten, line by line, by a team of engineers who were building something they had never been asked to build before. A system that meant everyone, and actually meant it. Lena closed her laptop, picked up her phone, stared at the contact she had never saved but had memorized anyway. She put the phone down. She was not ready. Not yet. But not yet was starting to feel different than it used to. Nathan, for his part, was living inside the machine he was rebuilding. He had moved out of the top-floor office and into a workspace on the 14th floor, closer to the engineering teams, surrounded by whiteboards covered in routing diagrams and ethical framework drafts. His suits were wrinkled now. He drank bad coffee from a communal pot. He ate lunch in the cafeteria with engineers who were 20 years younger than him and who had ideas he should have listened to 5 years ago. Claire Bradshaw told him he looked like a different person. Better or worse, he asked. Less polished, more present. He thought about that, present. He had spent his career designing systems that predicted the future, optimized for it, controlled it. Being present meant something different. It meant sitting with the mess, letting the counter stay dirty, leaving the report crooked. He had kept Lena's pen, the one she never actually left behind. He kept it in his desk drawer, and some mornings he opened the drawer and looked at it and did not pick it up and closed the drawer again. It was an ordinary pen, black ink, slightly chewed on the cap, the kind of pen you buy in a pack of 12 at a drugstore. It was the most valuable thing in his office. 6 months after the report, on a Tuesday in October, Lena took a bus to Milwaukee. She did not tell Patrick. She did not tell anyone. She packed a bag with one change of clothes and her laptop and a book she would not read, and she got on a bus at 7 in the morning and watched Oregon turn into Idaho, turn into Montana, turn into the flat, wide middle of the country that always made her feel like the earth was trying to tell her something about the value of emptiness. She did not know if Nathan would come. She had not contacted him. She had not sent a message through their old channel, or through any channel at all. She simply went to Frankie's Diner on a Tuesday, sat in their booth, and ordered coffee. Dolores was still there. Same apron. Same expression that suggested she had been born skeptical, and the world had never given her a reason to stop. "You are back," Dolores said. "Not a question. I am back. He is not here. I know. You want pie. Please." Dolores brought the pie, cherry, same as always. Lena ate it, and it tasted exactly the way she remembered, which was to say, it tasted like the memory of what pie should be, and the actual quality was beside the point. She sat for an hour, then 2. The diner filled and emptied around her. A family with 3 children who argued about who got to sit by the window. A truck driver who ate a cheeseburger in 4 bites and left a $20 tip. 2 teenagers who shared a milkshake and looked at each other with the uncomplicated want of people who had not yet learned that wanting is rarely simple. At 3:47 in the afternoon, the door opened. Nathan Cole walked in. He was wearing jeans and a sweater and shoes that did not look like they cost $1,100. His hair was longer than it had been. He looked tired. He looked alive. He saw her, stopped, stood in the doorway with one hand on the door and the other at his side, and something moved across his face that was too complicated for a single word. It was surprise and relief and fear and want, and the particular pain of seeing someone you missed in a place you both agreed to leave behind. He walked to the booth, sat down across from her. The vinyl squeaked. "Dolores told you I was here," Lena said. "Dolores called me 6 minutes after you sat down. She has my number." "Since when?" "Since the second time we came here. I gave her my card in case anything happened to the diner. I told her I would help with whatever she needed." Lena stared at him. "You gave Dolores your personal number and a blank offer of help. She makes terrible pie. Someone has to look out for her." Something cracked in Lena's chest. Not a dramatic crack, a small one, the kind that lets light in. Dolores brought a second coffee without being asked. She set it down in front of Nathan, looked at both of them, and walked away shaking her head. "Your new routing algorithms have a blind spot," Lena said, because starting with the work was safer than starting with anything else, and she needed safe ground to stand on before she could step off the edge. "I know," Nathan said. "The predictive policing integration. Your ethics board is not auditing it. I know that too. You know, and you have not fixed it." He picked up his coffee, drank, set it down. "I was hoping you would tell me about it," he said. "You could have called. You could have come back." The sentence landed between them like a coin tossed onto the table. Heads or tails, stay or go. Lena looked at him. She looked at his hands, which were wrapped around his coffee cup and were not flat on the table and were not still. They were just hands, holding something warm. "I published a 53-page report that called your life's work systematically biased. I cost you your board majority. I cost you 2 years of profitability. I humiliated you in front of Congress and the entire country. Yes. And you want to know why I did not come back. I know why you did not come back. I want to know why you are here now." She looked at the pie, the coffee, the sugar dispenser with the sticky lid, the fluorescent lights that made everything look slightly green. She looked at the booth where they had argued about algorithms and eaten bad pie and told each other the smallest, most essential truths about themselves. Because doing the right thing and being okay are not the same equation, she said, and she was quoting Patrick, and she did not care. "And I solved one, and I am still stuck on the other." Nathan was quiet, not the calculating quiet or the defensive quiet she had catalogued in their early meetings. A different quiet, the quiet of a man who was listening with everything he had. "I rebuilt the routing system," he said. 18 months ahead of schedule. Response time disparities are down 31% across all contracted cities. The equity parameters are built into the base layer now. They cannot be removed without disassembling the entire architecture. "I saw the data. You have been watching. I have been paying attention. There is a difference. Not much of one." She almost smiled. He saw it. The corners of his mouth did something they had not done in 6 months. "The Detroit neighborhoods," he said, "my old zip code. Response times are now within 2% of the city average." Lena heard what he was saying, and also what he was not saying. He had fixed his own neighborhood. Not first, probably, but he had fixed it. The system he built to escape his past was now serving the people who still lived in it, and that closing of the circle was not redemption, because redemption is too clean a word for the messy, ongoing, never-finished work of being responsible for the power you hold. But it was something. It was a start. "Your ethics board still needs to audit the predictive policing integration," she said. "Will you do it?" "I am not going to work for you, Nathan. I am not asking you to work for me. I am asking you to audit us, independently, through open veil. Published findings, full transparency." She looked at him. He was serious. He was offering her ongoing access to his system, not as a secret shared between 2 people in a diner, but as a formal public accountability structure. He was building her into the architecture, not as an insider, as a check. A balance, the thing that keeps the system honest. That would make OpenVeil a permanent oversight partner to one of the largest tech infrastructure companies in the world, she said. "Yes. Patrick will have a cardiac event." "Is that a yes?" It is a Patrick will need to sit down. She was stalling, and they both knew it, because the professional offer was real and important, and she would accept it because it was the right thing for the work and for the communities they both cared about. But that was not why she was in Milwaukee. Nathan. Yes. Why did you keep the pen? He looked at her. She could see him decide to tell the truth, and she could see what the decision cost him, because truth, for a man who spent his life behind systems and controls, was the most vulnerable architecture of all. Because it was yours, he said, and because after you left, my apartment had nothing in it that belonged to anyone but me, and I realized that was not a feature, it was a flaw. The diner hummed around them. Dolores wiped the counter. The pie case glowed. Outside, Milwaukee was gray and ordinary and completely unaware that two people in a corner booth were trying to figure out how to stand in the same room again after burning everything down between them. I am angry at you, Lena said. Still, for the 2 years you knew about the bias and did nothing. You should be. And I am angry at myself for caring about someone I was supposed to be investigating. You should probably be angry about that too. And I do not know how to do this. Whatever this is, I do not have a framework for it. There is no algorithm. No, he said, there is not. I deal with systems. I understand systems. I do not understand this. Nathan reached across the table. Not for her hand, for her fork. He cut a piece of her pie, the pie he had never liked, the pie that was nostalgically good and actually mediocre, and he ate it. Neither do I, he said with his mouth full, and it was so ungraceful, so un-Nathan, so far from the man who aligned folders with counter edges and wore $1,100 shoes, that Lena laughed. It was a real laugh, the kind that starts in the belly and arrives at the mouth before the brain can approve it. She put her hand over her face and laughed into her palm, and he watched her with an expression she had never seen on him, an expression that had no strategy behind it, no calculation, no control. Just a man looking at a woman who was laughing in a diner in Milwaukee and feeling the precise, irrational, unoptimizable thing that no algorithm in the world could route or predict or contain. This is going to be complicated, Lena said. Everything worth building is complicated. That sounds like something from a TED Talk. It sounds like something from a man who just ate your terrible pie with his hands. You used a fork. The sentiment stands. She looked at him across the table. The space between them was not clean. It was not resolved. It was littered with 53 pages and congressional testimony, and a stock drop, and 3 names in a notes app, and a yellow dish towel, and a pen that was never left behind, and a photograph of a mother with kind eyes. It was layered with everything they had done to each other, and for each other, and because of each other. It was, in the language of the systems they both understood, a complex architecture, with no single point of failure and no single point of control. It was distributed, resilient, messy, human. She reached across the table and took his hand. His fingers closed around hers. They were warm. Dolores walked past their booth, refilled both coffees without stopping, and muttered something under her breath that sounded like finally, but could have been, check please. They sat like that for a long time. Two people who had found each other in the space between power and accountability, between the system and the people the system was supposed to serve, between the person you are and the person you are still becoming. Outside, Milwaukee was getting dark. The streetlights came on one by one, a small automated system doing its small automated job, routing light to where it was needed. Inside, they held hands and drank bad coffee and did not talk about what came next, because what came next was not a plan or a timeline or a quarterly review. It was the daily, unglamorous, beautiful work of two people choosing to sit across from each other and do better. Not perfectly, not all at once, not according to any parameter that could be optimized or any efficiency metric that could be measured. Just better, day by day, decision by decision, cup of bad coffee by cup of bad coffee. Lena stole a bite of his pie. He let her. It was, for now, enough. And for the first time in a very long time, for both of them, now was not a compromise. It was exactly where they wanted to be. The Open Veil audit began 3 weeks later. Lena flew to Chicago, which was the first time she had ever flown anywhere on Open Veil's budget, instead of taking a bus, and Patrick came with her because he said someone needed to be the professional one, and it clearly was not going to be her. The first meeting at Axon headquarters was strange. Lena walked through the front door of a building she had spent months infiltrating from the outside, and the security guard handed her a visitor badge with her real name on it. Her real name, on a badge, in the lobby of the company whose systems she had broken into and mapped and exposed. It felt like wearing a name tag at your own crime scene. Nathan met them on the 14th floor, his new floor. He shook Patrick's hand and introduced him to Claire Bradshaw and the lead engineer on the reform project, a young woman named Sophie Lynn who had been hired specifically to rebuild the equity layer and who had the particular energy of someone who believed deeply in the work she was doing and would fight anyone who tried to stop her. Sophie and Lena understood each other within the first 5 minutes. They spoke the same language, the language of people who saw systems not as neutral tools, but as expressions of the values of the people who built them. By the end of the first day, they had a working framework for the audit that was more rigorous than anything Axon's internal team had produced. Patrick watched Lena work and said nothing. On the flight home, he said one thing. He looks at you like you are the most important system he has ever built. That is a terrible metaphor. I am not a writer, the point stands. The audit took 4 months. Lena traveled to Chicago 6 times. Each trip was professional. Meetings, data reviews, presentations to the ethics board. She stayed in a hotel near the office. She ate at restaurants recommended by Sophie. She did the work with the rigor and independence that Open Veil's credibility demanded. And on 2 of those trips, after the work was done, she went to Nathan's apartment. Not the glass cathedral on the top floors. He had sold that. He lived now on the 23rd floor of a different building, a place with lower ceilings and actual furniture that looked like someone sat on it, and a kitchen that had dishes in the sink. There was still only one photograph, his mother. But next to it now was a second frame, and in that frame was a page torn from a printout, a single line of text that read, "You missed a partition on server cluster 9, sloppy." The first message he ever sent her, framed, on a shelf next to his mother. "You are sentimental," Lena said the first time she saw it. "I am a man who keeps evidence of the moment everything changed. That is not sentimental. That is data preservation. It is sentimental. It is both." They were not easy together. They argued about the audit findings. They argued about the timeline for implementing changes. They argued about whether Axon should make its routing algorithms open source, which Lena believed was essential for public trust, and Nathan believed was a security risk that would take years to mitigate safely. They argued about these things with the intensity of people who respected each other's intelligence too much to pull punches, and then they ordered takeout and argued about what to order. It was not a fairy tale. It was not a story where the billionaire changes overnight, and the activist softens her principles and they meet in some comfortable middle ground where everyone is happy and nothing is hard. It was 2 people doing the most difficult thing 2 people can do, which is to love someone whose convictions are in direct tension with your own, and to let that tension exist without resolving it, without one person winning and the other losing, without flattening the complexity into something easier to hold. Nathan's company was smaller than it had been, less profitable, more scrutinized. His name still appeared in articles about algorithmic bias, and it would for years, possibly forever. That was the cost of having built something that worked exactly as designed and hurt people as a side effect, and no amount of reform or apology or restructuring would erase it completely. But the system was better, measurably, verifiably better. The audit proved it. Lena published the findings through Open Veil, a 28-page report that acknowledged the progress Axon had made while identifying the work that remained. It was honest, it was fair, it was the kind of accountability that does not tear down but builds up, that holds power to its own stated values and says, "Show me." Nathan read it, all 28 pages, standing up. "Accurate," he said. "Obviously. You are going to keep auditing us. Every year, for as long as your systems serve the public." That could be a very long time. Yes, it could. He looked at her. She looked at him. Two people standing in the space between what was and what could be, between the system and the soul, between the code and the human beings who live inside its consequences. Nathan opened a drawer in his desk, took out the pen, her pen, the one she never left behind. He held it out to her. "I think this is yours," he said. She took it, looked at it, a cheap black pen with a chewed cap. The most ordinary object in the world, carrying the weight of everything that had happened between them. She put it in her pocket. "Tuesday," she said. "Milwaukee? Where else?" He smiled. Not the controlled, calculated smile she had seen in press photos. A real one, crooked, unpracticed, the smile of a man who had spent his whole life building walls and had finally met someone who walked through them, not to destroy what was inside, but to show him that what was inside was worth more than the walls had ever been. They were not finished, they were not fixed, they were two people at the beginning of something that had no optimization path, and no efficiency metric, and no algorithm to tell them what came next. They had a diner in Milwaukee and a cat named Clementine, and a stack of reports and a pen, and the stubborn, unreasonable, completely unquantifiable belief that the world could be better than the one they inherited. It was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything.